Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Ronna. Egberto, Willies, your host. Thank you so kind for being part of the show. We are going to have, as usual, a great show for you today. Welcome aboard to everybody. We're still getting all the nooks and crannies cleaned up and set up and making sure that it's all working the way it should. How are my peeps doing today? I trust that my peeps are all doing fine. We are here setting her up with almost the last speeches, the last touches ready. And guess what? I think we're almost there, except for Daily Coast, but we're always almost there. Anyway, folks, welcome aboard. We have in the house, Patrick Barons. I forgot where you're from, Patrick. Says Egberto Willies, you're spot on about appellate court bailing Trump's traitorous butt out. Owe you a coffee, sir. And I'm ready for the coffee whenever you're going to get me a coffee, my brother. Anyway, let's see. We've got Paul Fleming in from Atlanta, Georgia. Melanie Keelan in from Barcelona, Spain. Bridge MCP in from Binghamton, New York, upstate New York. Yvette Avery Herod from Atlanta, Georgia. We've got AVQ, Brooklyn, New York. Who else is in the house? Yvette. I got Yvette already as well. I think we got the initial crew till all those mail outs go out and bring more folks into the fold. Let's see where we're at to see if that has rung its bell yet. I don't think that has rung the bell yet. So those guys aren't in yet. Anyway, we're going to have a great show for you today. I want to give a humongous thank you to Brother Rudnin. I got it in the mail, Mr. Rudnin. Mr. Rudnin is a kind supporter of the show, and he's always there for us to make sure that to do his part in making sure we can continue doing what we did. Thank you for that most generous contribution that you provided, that you sent over, Senor Rudnin. We appreciate that quite very much. And I appreciate all of you that are supporters and with the constancy of your support to make sure we can continue to do the things that we are doing. We just could not possibly do it without all of you. You guys are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Anyway, folks, I'm going to start with a little 6-minute piece because we have an interview, a 28-minute interview that I want to play from a friend, a former pastor who had to leave the evangelical church. We're going to play that one in a minute, but I want you to listen to Ronna McDaniel and how she was handled, and then we'll go ahead and take it on the other side. NBC did a number on Kristen Welker. She had an interview set up with former RNC Chair, liar, of course, Ronna McDaniel. And the interesting thing about it, though, is subsequently, NBC went ahead and hired the former RNC Chair, Ronna McDaniel, the person who was on the phone with Donald Trump coercing people with these false elector schemes, etc. She was hired as a news contributor to NBC. So it was a real mess. And in fact, after the interview, Chuck Todd came on and really admonished NBC for what they did. But I got a snippet of the interview that alone should be grounds for them to rescind on the contract. If given an interview with another NBC correspondent, and it's supposed to be a serious interview, and you are going to, instead of talking news and talking facts, you're going to spin party line and lies, that creates a problem. I want to listen to this snippet, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Do you disagree with Trump saying he's going to free those who've been charged?
I do not think people who committed violent acts on January 6th should be freed.
So you disagree with that? He's been saying that for months. Ronna, why not speak out earlier? Why just speak out about that now?
When you're the RNC chair, you kind of take one for the whole team, right? Now I get to be a little bit more myself, right? This is what I believe. I don't think violence should be in our political discourse, Republican or Democrat. And I disagree with that. I agree with him on a whole host of other things. Let's close the border. Let's make sure we have good incomes for people. Let's make sure we do a lot of great things. But on that point, I don't think we should be freeing people who violently attacked Capitol Hill police officers and attacked the Capitol.
Ronna, that is such a fundamental point. People would argue such a fundamental point to our democracy. You say you still support him. I assume you're still going to vote for him based on that. What do you say to those who hear your answers to that question and feel like it's hypocritical to then vote for him?
I think we have to make a choice, right? And everybody's looking at their candidates and they may say, I don't love everything about this. I disagree with this. I don't like how they say this. But for me, when I look at my state of Michigan and I look at the cost of food, the cost of rent, the cost of insurance, that I feel less safe. So crime is on the rise, that we're seeing fentanyl come across our border, that we're seeing an open border. I don't think there's any choice but to vote for the Republican. Even though you may have disagreements, it's him or Biden, and that's the choice.
Just to be clear, though, studies show that crime actually is going down in major cities, and the fentanyl that is getting into the country is coming across legal ports of entry. But let me turn to this next question. Mitch McConnell said that Donald Trump was practically and morally responsible for the attack on the Capitol. Do you agree with him?
I don't think he wanted that attack to happen on the Capitol, but I will say that attack is a dark day in our history. There's nothing to be proud of about that day. There's nothing that we can look back and say this was good. It's changed our whole country. And so I condemn what happened on January 6th.
Now, yeah, she lies about the border. She lies about crime. She lies about the current economic system as implemented by Joe Biden, how good the economy is, relatively speaking, to other capitalist economies, etc. She lies about it, right? And good for Kristen Welker. Kristen Welker corrects her in real time. And more journalists have to do that. Now, her litany of lies were so great that many of them went unchallenged by Kristen Welker. I mean, they've learned their lessons well from Donald Trump. Just keep a litany of lie in sequence, like on a conveyor belt. Lie after lie after lie after lie. Folks are not going to catch all of them, or will they have the time to refute all of them? Or even if they refute all of them, there are so many lies, it seems like, well, it's just a mush of fact-chasing lies. So to have one of those, or I should say yet another one of those on NBC's news, is a disservice to NBC proper. NBC would do well to get rid of Ronna McDaniel, because if on her first interview that she gives to NBC in recent times starts out with party line lies, that isn't good for the credibility of any program that she appears on, because we actually know that instead of being a contributor, what she will be is someone that themselves on a panel has to be fact-checked. Ronna McDaniel must depart NBC News. And rumor has it that if it's not already happened, that she will be gone. Gloria Morrow, welcome to Politics Done Right. She should not work on NBC. I agree. Bridge MCP says, Michael, I hope. Well, let's see what Michael said. Michael said, I wonder if NBC will fire her. I heard that that's in the works. We'll see. Bridge MCP said, NBC is pissed and MSNBC won't have her on. Great. Michael says the MSNBC hosts didn't want Ronna McDaniel on their air. She was a critical player in the January 6th fake elector scheme. Basically, hiring an insurrectionist as a contributor is a non-starter. Exactly. She was a terrorist. Let's call it what it is. She is a terrorist. All right. Bruce Pollard. Yeah, this morning's show was great. Wild. A lot of calls came in. I kind of covered the subject that I wrote for, but as you know, the show belonged to everybody. So we went all over the place and I kind of enjoyed it. I like when the show is directed by the people, right? Including, so it was great. You should call in sometimes too, brother. All right, let's see. Michael Ronna said, this is someone who tried to overturn with a political plot, then turned her back on the results where their MAGA turned violent when the political plot failed. Exactly. Bree said she didn't answer the question. She never does. These guys never do, because when you're lying, anything that doesn't fit the lie doesn't deserve an answer, right? Let's see. Maywood says, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Maywood from Long Beach, California. How are you doing? By the way, Gloria Maro, where are you from? Where are you from? We are from all over the country and the world. We have somebody in the chat from Barcelona, Spain. All right. Michael says, there is no southern border crisis. That's a fiction the right-wing bubble is pushing as an election point. Exactly. And I mean, there's a lot of people coming into America, but there are reasons, rationales why that is happening. Bruce says, whose tail were you all chasing? Don't know, brother. Don't know, brother. Don't say hey, I forgot what I've been forgetting some words in Spanish. So don't forget, what is tail again? I'll remember it in a minute. Anyway, Melissa Bowie is in the house. What up, my dear Melissa Bowie? I haven't heard from you in a while. I thought you abandoned us. We can't have that. Let's see. Bridge MCP says, MSNBC Lawrence said news people always followed the Nixon rule for later. I actually saw him I saw it yesterday. I should have gotten a clip of that Bridge and put it out. Didn't. I mean, I have all this stuff, backed up, but I got so much data to pull from. What can I say? Anyhow, what time is it? It's at 16. Let's go ahead and do the interview from John Pavlovitz. I think you're going to like it. He wanted to talk a little bit about his book, but actually about a lot of stuff. And I think you're going to find this interesting. The way from Michael Rudden, the way modern conservatives are, they lie, flood the zone with offense, then rarely defend their lies after they are fact-checked. On the rare occasion they do defend, they tend to move on to the next topic with whataboutism as they're doing so. I mean, it's a technique. It's a technique that works because you flood the zone with so much lies and misinformation. Correcting it takes all of your energy. So what I tell people to do is correct once and go ahead on the offensive. Correct once and go ahead on the offensive. In other words, when she comes and say, I am voting for Donald Trump, it says that is a wrong thing to do. You're voting for Donald Trump after you've created an insurrection. That is that makes you a terrorist, and move on from there. We, the people that are going to be voting Democratic or whatever, we will make sure that we put all those people that are terrorists behind bars. Let them pay the price for what they're doing. And we will make sure to support and have democracy. We will make sure that people get their health care. We will call them out and immediately pivot on the offensive. And do remember that you voted against infrastructure. You voted against health care for mama. You voted against this. Immediately pivot to the truth. We have to learn how to fight. Attack and pivot to what you're going to do for Americans. Attack. You did this, you did that, you did this, and here's what we are going to do as we continue to grow our control. Very important. Seems like Bridge MCP wants me to put something on the screen before I go to the video. What Bridge asks, Bridge gets. I hope you don't get me in trouble because I'm putting it right here now. Oh, actually, it's a good one. Let's get that one before I go to the video. Let's do that. Let's do it. Democrats say, we'd like cops to stop killing minorities. Republican says, Dems hate police. Democrat says, women should have the right to choose. Republican says, Dems want to kill babies. Democrats say, we need reasonable immigration policies. Republican says, Dems want open borders. Democrat says, we kneel in protest of inequality. Republicans say, Dems hate the flag soldiers in America. Democrat says, we should wear masks to protect others. Republican says, Dems want to take away your freedom. Democrats say, we should have background checks. Republicans say, Dems want to take your guns. Democrats say, feds should not be policing in cities. Republican says, Dems encourage rioting. Democrat says people should have a living wage. Republican says Democrats want to give everyone free stuff. Democrat says we want religious freedom for everyone. Republican says Dems want Sharia law. Democrat says taxes should be used for the benefit of everyone. Republican says Dems want socialism. Democrat says we want people to be able to vote safely during a pandemic. Republican says Dems want to rig the election. Democrat says people need more unemployment assistance. Republican says Dems block unemployment assistance. Democrats says, listen, we want to find ways to help people. Republican says, listen, we just want to find ways to misrepresent everything you say in order to scare people into voting for us, even though we offer zero solutions. Well, Bridge, I could not have written that any better. That is what we're dealing with. The misrepresenting of good, turning good into evil. Michael Rudden says, you can add one. Democrats say, we want to prevent Israel from committing genocide in Gaza. Republicans counter, you hate Israel. Bad Jews going against your religion. Sounds Trumpian. Sounds like 1984. Love it. All right, guys. Thank you for all of that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that. It was wonderful. Now let's listen to Brother Pavlovitz. I think you are going to like what he has to say. Welcome to another edition of Politics and Right. My name is Egberto, Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us today. John Pavlovitz is a writer, pastor, activist, and storyteller from Wake Forest, North Carolina. Over the past decade, his thought-provoking blog, Stuff That Needs to Be Said, has reached a diverse worldwide audience with over 100 million views. A 25-year veteran in the trenches of local church ministry, Pavlovitz is committed to equality, diversity, and justice, both inside and outside faith communities. His books include A Bigger Table, Stuff That Needs to Be Said. And guys, you got to check that one out. And If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk. He currently directs Empathetic People Network, which I just learned about, believe it or not, a vibrant online community that connects people from all over the world who want to create a more compassionate planet. Brother John Pavlovitz, how are you doing this morning?
So good to be with you again, my friend. Hope you're well.
I am doing well. Well, I want to start it this way because these are your words. It's not enough to be sickened by the injustices and atrocities around us. We have to be a visible and vocal presence in the world. John Pavlovitz says, we suffer from a poverty of empathy. We must fight for the people that we love, for the nation we dream of, for the causes that matter, for the world our children will inherit, for our relationships and our own health. Such is the stuff in his new book, Worth Fighting For, Finding Courage and Compassion When Cruelty is Trending, is made up intentionally launching during this critical election year. Pavlovitz, the pastor who lost his church speaking up for the rights of the LGBTQ community, returns with his outspoken yet compassionate voice, his unique version of hope in a book when it's needed. And I tell you what, I don't call that outspoken. I call that just, damn it, telling the truth.
Thank you, man. And that's the way I've seen it since I began. People early on, when I, as a pastor, started speaking out, they would say, you're so courageous. And I just say, it's really not courage. It's simply telling people what you see from where you are. And we all have a responsibility to share life as we see it and as the truth unfolds in front of us. And there's really no option. It's not about courage. It's about simply doing the humane thing. And that's what I've tried to do.
Well, I think that's what anybody who calls themselves an activist in this world, I think that's what they're compelled to do. Now, when you pretty much left your church, you had a certain amount of authority there. Did you feel liberated, able to really do what you know in your own, whatever your ideology is, to be humane? Did you feel that liberation to do that?
I did, primarily because doing the work of a minister, I didn't realize going into it that it was a very political position in a small p, that you have to manage the expectations of many people. And because of that, there is a bit of inauthenticity that can creep in when you're not truly able to speak your convictions clearly. And I nudged my community as far as I could, and then went to another church community, and I didn't have that equity of trust and didn't have that relational capital, and things didn't go well. But once I was outside of that, exactly, I was able to ask anything and say everything and just be completely honest about where I stood. And that's when the word started to reach people. That's when the audience grew. And for me, it's been a reminder, just that's the only thing we can each do, is to speak our most authentic truth and live with what happens as a result.
I like to speak about spheres of influence. When I speak to my audience, both on air, on the radio, and on my internet programs, what I try to promote is that every individual, I am not a rugged individual. I believe in community. I believe in our social well-being, but I believe all of us intrinsically have a sphere of influence, and those spheres of influence overlap. And who you are determine what your sphere is going to look like. And in following some of the work that you do, I've watched you establish your own sphere of influence. And what's interesting here is people gravitate to it organically, and not because they believe they have to be following some orthodoxy or following something. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. It's been important for me from the very beginning, because when I started speaking, I was not speaking on behalf of a political party or a religious institution, but simply as an individual who had these tensions and questions and prompts, and people who those words have resonated with have joined us in that. So the words became a hub for a really disparate group of people. But you're right. I believe that we all have this proximity to humanity in our circles of influence, and we have a responsibility to work within those places. So you don't need a massive platform or a podcast or a blog. You simply need to work in the small and close of your life. That's where you have proximity and agency, which is what the book and really what all of my work is about.
And I think it's been very effective. And like I said, it seems to be even more effective as you are able to do it, not like I said, not as an individual, but an individual who people gravitate because the message means something to them. Now, I find it interesting that, I got a little pre-release of your book that I kind of just scanned through some of the things. And I found it interesting that in the first part of it, so first chapter, you have a title that's a segment title, The Mental Health Crisis of MAGA America. And by God, I am not trying to disparage MAGA at all, but it has taken over such a part of our entire political ecosystem and otherwise that I am actually happy that it placed that far up, that top of your book.
Well, doing the work that I do, I travel all around the country in person and online, and I call myself a collector of stories, a war correspondent, people sharing their, what's happening in the trenches of their lives. And over, the theme is exhaustion and its relational fracture. The relational fracture and the exhaustion are really what's happening here. It's not about political ideologies or warring theologies. It's really about where all of this settles down into our lives and our relationships. And so looking at that mental health crisis of the past 8 years or so is really just acknowledging all we've been through politically, plus the pandemic, and that people are simply not equipped to deal with this much trauma and this much grief. And we need to attend to it as much as anything else. As much as the issues in the legislation, there is that personal collateral damage.
Now, it is interesting because you brought up that the amount of trauma that we're feeling and it's coming from all directions.
Yep.
It seems like what people like you and others have done by taking the bull by the horns. There was a time where we always looked for the patriarch to solve the problem, but we found out that the former hierarchical models don't work anymore, and that it's more a collaborative, networking type of model that we all need, especially because of the vast size of the country, the vast different identities that we have. How, and I kind of think I know the answer to this, but how have you used that in both your book writings, your social networking, and et cetera, to bring it all together?
That's a great question. I think for me, it was looking at the elemental things of life. Where are we all universally placed? And I look at things like fear and grief and loneliness, and those hit us all, regardless of our politics or our theology or our life stage. And so I try to speak to those things, and then to the universal parts of being human, about empathy and generosity and kindness. And that's what I think it has been, this, as you said, this organic assembly of people who may not have identified themselves as in a tribe of affinity without the writing. And so I've just been grateful that it's been a spot for them to gather, and then to decide, now what do we do collectively? We work individually, but what do we do as a group of people who are passionate about some of the same things?
Now, you had a flock. You were a pastor. But as you know, I don't want to say pastoring is in decline, but organized religion is in decline. That doesn't mean that spirituality is, or, all those things remain. The things that people want remain. How have you taken your experience as a pastor, both negative and positive, as a pastor, to form your sphere in such a manner that you don't hold on to the negatives that people just associate now with, let's say, the evangelical movement and many of the religious movement?
I think it begins with what your agenda really is. So when you're a pastor, for example, your job, part of your job is to represent that tradition or that denomination and that particular community. And when you're a politician, the same thing. So in some ways, your instincts might be noble, but you can easily become beholden to those communities. And so doing the work that I do, I was able to begin by saying, what is my intention here? And my intention was simply to perpetuate a movement that was born out of empathy and not fear. And so when you do that, then you're not trying to convert someone or fix them or save them. You're simply trying to share life with people through the words, and that's where you meet them. And so there's a different agenda. My motives are simply to inspire and encourage and challenge, and that those words do whatever they're going to do within people. And I don't need to guide them into a particular result. I just want them to ask better questions.
In other words, using your own words and title, how to talk about your religious beliefs and not be a total, you know what?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, there are days when I fail it, when you do, because the things that we're talking about, whether it's our politics or our theology, our morality, this is deeply important stuff to all of us. And we know that it's not just about laws and legislation and movements of in politics. This is about human beings ultimately. So we are all deeply passionate about those things. So there should be a measure of energy and confrontation and boldness that happens because of that. But we should try to do that without dehumanizing the person across from us. That is the thing that I reject so often in other people. And so I don't want to do that. So how can I retain my convictions and speak passionately without dehumanizing the person in front of me, without turning them into a caricature or a stereotype? And it's an almost hourly challenge to do that.
I have this tenet that I live by, and that is, most people are good people. So, I consider my circle of friends progressives, liberals, conservatives, MAGA, Republicans, all of these folks I try to stick around. And sometimes I get each segment upset because one may think I'm giving too much agency to another one, etc. But I find that is actually what works best. And you get a chance to develop a level of trust among all these groups. Now, I must say that people like yourself and others that are promoting this type of thing is influential on what I do, the topics that I do. And that's one of the reasons I like having people like you on, because again, I think the more people see many others try to touch on everybody and not necessarily segment people, the more effective we can on changing the country. Now, I'm of the belief that externalities are forcing divisions. Can you elaborate on that if that plays into your platform?
That is a huge challenge for all of us, because our politics and our religion have been so tribalized that there's almost an all or nothing mentality that we are thrown into when we simply enter in the fray of discussing something like immigration or healthcare or voting laws. We end up being pulled to those opposite poles. And it's a constant challenge to kind of stay in what I call the compassionate middle, the humane middle of people who are really still willing to listen to one another across aisles of difference. And that's one of the challenges for someone like myself, who is more progressive, that I'm often set up as an adversary of a certain voting bloc. And I try to make it clear that I'm actually for them as human beings and for their families, that I want the things that I want for the planet: health, affordable healthcare, great public education. I want those things for them and their families as well as my own. And it's really trying to let them know that the politicians that they support may not have those interests in mind. So that's a huge challenge sometimes, to speak across those divisions and let people know that you're actually fighting for them, not really with them.
Now, you were among all the pastors in the evangelical movement. How did Jesus stop supporting the things that Jesus preached in the Bible? When I say Jesus, I mean the interpretation of Jesus by evangelicals, because you just mentioned so much. You just mentioned the policies. You went from just talking on let's say a religious item to specific policies that help people. Things that Jesus all stood for: the foreigner, the immigrant, well-being, humanity. How did that change come about? Why did that change come about?
I think what we find is that most people have the instincts to be decent and to help and to encourage, and they'll begin on an endeavor, and that may be a political endeavor or in a church community. And I think as people gain power or influence, it can be difficult to hold on to the perspective of what actually matters. And I think you see that in the church. You've seen it for thousands of years, but there can be a disconnection, a mission drift from where Jesus began this ministry that was really founded on empathy. And if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, it looks almost antithetical to much of the politics and religion we see in America today. And I think that's because as much as we want it to, I don't think the American dream and the gospel of Jesus align very well. And so we have these combating sort of sets of virtues, and often money and power are going to win because we measure things that way more and more in our culture. Whereas I think the movement of Jesus is a movement of the street. It's an organic from the ground up, and it's about interdependent community and looking out for the other. And I don't think that's as fashionable as it used to be. And that's what I say when cruelty is trending. I think we need to bring back compassion as a value of our culture.
You made a very dangerous statement, dear my brother. Oh. You made a very dangerous statement. Wait. But I mean, a very true statement that is so dangerous to some of the people who run our system and would have us believe otherwise. But I think it is so important that message gets out there, especially coming from a former pastor at one of these mega churches, because Um, it almost gives, look, I know a lot of evangelical Christians, my sister inclusive, and it's amazing that, how lock and step they stay with pastors. That's what a pastor is. That is what a pastor is. You pastor people. And they have a lot of power. You had a lot of power within your church. Well, it's interesting because you probably have a lot more power now with the audience that you command. But you had a lot of power with the audience, and it's difficult to deal with how these guys are leading their flock. I want to get a little bit deeper now, away from, let's say, religion, and start to talk a little bit about, after all, this is politics done right.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about politics. What kind of politics would you like to see occur after the election in 2024?
Well, I think a politics that is just like a theology, a politics that is worth something actually gives more access to more people. So I want to see more people represented by our politics. I want to see people welcomed as they are without caveat or condition. And I want a politics that sees that there are people who always have less than we do, and to make sure that we are somehow responsible to and for them, that we realize that our nation, that we are all tethered together. And I don't see that in politics a lot. There's always an angle to a particular policy or a piece of legislation that's being proposed. So I wish we could get to the place where all parties are looking for the common good. And that is the politics that I wish we could see, simply for the common good, and that we could have conversations on necessarily that we may have the same goals, but very different ways that we want to get there. And so some of that's about communicating more effectively and being more willing to come to the table of conversation with a posture of curiosity for the other.
You recently wrote some blogs that I read your blogs, and you recently wrote a blog about some progressives, sometimes with the stance that they take, can create circumstances that we don't want. And I think that was that was talking about how some of them have been dealing with the current president, Biden. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, as we talked about earlier, when we are deeply empathetic people, we are going to be passionate wherever we see injustice. And the challenge is looking at, we have this influx of urgency and of trauma. And I think we're not really built for how much we're seeing now because of social media. And because of that, it can be difficult to know, how do I get my bearings? Where is my energy best directed? And so I think many times we can be very myopic about something and not see the bigger picture. And for me, the bigger picture is always, where are we historically, and where is our vote? Does it need to be used strategically so that we can make sure that we have a nation going forward where we all do have human and civil rights, where we do have voting rights? And I want to preserve those things. And so I think we're precariously at the edge of losing some things for a long time. And so that's what I'm constantly battling with. We have the urgency of the moment, but then we have to step back and see what is actually happening here, and how can I best work to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice.
What are your thoughts on the former president?
I believe that he has proven himself to be a man who is not of the character or moral fiber to be leading, because I think there's a deeply seated narcissism that is at play. There's a self-preservation and protection. And so I think we see his ability to do whatever it takes to protect himself at the detriment of our nation and its laws and its institutions. And so for me, I started doing this work, writing explicitly about politics in 2016, because I felt this was a pivot point moment for us, that if we elevated this particular human being, it wasn't about Republican, Democrat, but this particular human being was not equipped and would really pollute so much of our culture. And I feel like that is simply what's happened.
Okay. Well, I mean, in other words, you think, or do you think we are in a moment like many are talking about that it's sort of that existential moment? We must not have that person as president again?
I think the saddest thing that I've seen is that when we conflate a person with the answer, whatever that question that we have, when we look at a person and say they can, or a political party, they can fix it, that's a dangerous place to be. And I think at this point in time, we can look at the last 8 or 9 years, and you and I know racism wasn't created in 2016, and bigotry and nationalism and misogyny and all these things have existed. But I think there's been a releasing of it, maybe an emboldening of that, because from the leadership has said, we're not going to have those standards in place anymore. And once you have that precedent established, I think you see the floodgates open. And while we've seen so much open hatred and hate crimes and anti-Semitism and, anti-Muslim rhetoric and on and on and on. So I do think existentially, it's about us as a nation saying, regardless of party, what is the human thing to do here? How do I vote in such a way that I steward the things that I claim to be important to me, not what I think I believe, but what do I actually believe, and how can I embody this through my vote in some way? I'm glad for that answer. Folks, you need to go ahead and get that book when it drops. I think it drops on, what day does it drop, the book? It's April 2nd, Tuesday.
April 2nd. Folks, the name of the book is Worth Fighting For, Finding Courage and Compassion When Cruelty is Trending. And I'm looking at an early copy here, folks. And in these times of, I don't want to call it despair, but for many, it is despair. Or where you think it's the end, or where you think we are forever against each other, it is great to see writing like this. From somebody like John Pavlovitz. So, John, the last question I always ask at the end of my interviews is, what would you have liked me to ask you that I somehow didn't?
Wow. I think I always would like to be asked about where we go from here, what hope does look like, because as you said, despair is a natural response. And so maybe that's the question.
Let's do it.
I would say that moving forward, we know the reasons that we have to grieve, and it's okay to grieve those things, but hopelessness is never helpful. Hopelessness has never allowed human and civil rights to grow. And so at this place in time in the history of the planet, we're simply here to steward humanity. And so we can be discouraged, we can be frustrated, but we can't be hopeless, because then we stop. And the only way that we fix this is to keep moving. So that's what I hope people will do.
Tell us a little bit about these other projects that you're working about. Tell us about your blog, how to get to your blog. Tell us about, I think it's a new social forum that you've created as well.
Sure. You can find me at johnpavlovitz.com, or my Substack platform, johnpavlovitz.substack.com. The site you're referring to is called Empathetic People Network. And Empathetic People Network is simply a social media community designed to bring people together, like we've been talking about, who may have found the writing as a hub, who the words of compassion resonate with. And we just get together on social media and we share life, and we talk about politics and religion and family and grief. So it's a way to have sort of a controlled social media environment where there's not bots and trolls and ads, and we can simply share life without worrying about someone coming with a combative spirit. It's really about that posture of curiosity that we talked about. So I invite people to check that out as well.
And folks, all the links will be inside of the blog that goes along with this post as well as in other places. A writer, a pastor, an activist, a storyteller, John Pavlovitz. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
My pleasure, my friend. Good to see you.
we spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.
Absolutely, folks. I hope you enjoyed the interview. With John Pavlovitz. He's one of the good guys. He's one of the good guys. All right, let's see what we got here. Scrolling back up to see where we're at. Mike Cisak, we have had massive healthcare inflation due to Medicare, Medicaid. It has cost us trillions, and we are in massive deficit each year. The only thing that has corrupted Medicare and Medicaid is privatizing or not having it as a social program. That means all the monies that we call expensiveness in Medicare and Medicaid is a result of the theft from the private sector. My wife has been in the hospital. In the hospital, they charge you ridiculous prices for a Q-tip. The waste is amazing, but it's all a part of a system designed to maximize how much of your money they can take either from the government, from your pockets, or from the insurance companies. And then the insurance companies themselves charge ridiculous prices for just paying a bill. The whole system is corrupt, and it's not the problem. It's corrupt not because of what government should do. It is corrupt because we allow our government to be bought by thugs in the private sector that screws you, every one of you that have health insurance of any form. You are officially screwed by a system designed to screw you. All right, let's see. Troy Nels. I didn't know he was under investigation. Good for him. He's a clown. He's out here from Texas. Rachel Maddow. Yes, she doesn't want to have anything to do with the Ronna McDaniel. Paul Fleming also says in 2025, the top 1% will get a tax cut of more than $60,000. Meanwhile, the bottom 60% will see a tax cut of less than $500, actually, if any. And guess what? A lot of that expires if the law doesn't get reestablished. So again, it is a constancy that we must solve. Compare the healthcare sectors between nations. We pay roughly double other OECD nations, yet we get worse outcomes, which is true. Our for-profit healthcare system is an outlier in the world, ruining lives, causing 500,000 medical bankruptcies per year. You need some introspection, even though I know you'll never even bother. Well, I mean, what we want to say is we do want to counter anybody that says Medicare, Medicaid, and private, and somehow all these programs make healthcare more expensive. The thing that makes healthcare more expensive are the people charging the prices for healthcare. Doesn't take a lot of gray matter to figure that one out. Let's see what else we got here. Paul Fleming says Justice Ketanji Brown asked the right question, reminding the judges that they don't have any medical experience, which is so true. Melissa Bowie says to 2247, the news said that the resolution put forth is not an immediate ceasefire. It's more like a motion to talk about it some more. The motion is solely symbolic because the United Nations doesn't have the enforcement capabilities unless, the United States really support going in with, it's ridiculous. I think the United Nations, for all practical purposes, is impotent. It's impotent. That's how we made it. We should change all of that. Egberto, one for the screen. Our healthcare system is considered a horror by the rest of the world. We pay double that every nation does, yet we're basically billed twice or thrice between government and insurance being charged. Then you have to pay deductibles and copay just to get worse outcomes. Even our life expectancies show that our healthcare system isn't worth it. Hey, you have a bad internet feed, my brother. Oh, I've seen that one before, Radnin. Let me put it up on the screen for a short while for people to see. That is a nasty chart there. You're going to have to enlarge it. But it just shows you that we are the outliers in healthcare completely. And the ones that you want to be is, believe it or not, is England, Great Britain. They complain about, oh, they have shortages, etc. You know what? People they live longer. And guess what? They show a card. Canada, you show a card and you're taken care of because they decided that healthcare is a right. And not only is it right, they show that they have some humanity. All right, we're getting close to the end of the program. So it's time for me to go ahead and do my ask, for which I say, folks, please support the program best that you can. How can you support the program? You can support the program by going to politicsdoneright.com/support, politicsdoneright.com/support, and choose one of the many options we have to support the program. Remember, we can't do this without you. This is your program, and we are the ones trying to make a difference. Let's see what else we have here. You can support us as well by becoming a paid subscriber of our newsletter. How can you do that? Go to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter, politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. And in going to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter, you have the options of what kind of support you want to give. You can get it for free. You can get our newsletter for free. Everything we try to do for free. But we ask people who have the wherewithal to support our program because, again, we cannot continue doing this unless we have your constant support. I want to thank Brother Rudnin. Brother Rudnin sent us a nice little change in the mail yesterday to support it. He's a constancy here. Linda update is that she's still very weak. This lupus shingles combination is a bitch. I just have to tell you that it's a bitch. She's lost about, I don't know, at least 20 pounds over. Well, let's see. In the aggregate, 20 pounds. She went from probably 130 pounds. She's now 112. That says something. But again, she had lost some weight before because she was having some other issues. So that just tells you how bad it is. Lupus shingle is a hardship I'd wish on nobody. And I don't wish it on her. She is weak. And, it's just going to take a while before all of that clears the system. It is terrible. Anyway, folks, please support our program by, let me put the newsletter link inside. Please go to politicsdoneright.com/newsletter and support it however you can. We have, you click on it and it tells you you can become a paid subscriber. Please consider doing that. And last but not least, please consider getting our books, politicsdoneright.com/books. And of course, my new book is out. And the title of my new book is, guess what? Tribulations of an Afro-Latino Caribbean Man. That's moi. I tell a whole lot of stories. I don't care what what race you think you are, your ethnicity or whatever. I promise you will find the stories in this book intriguing. And a lot of people will backstop and say, wow, I get it. I promise you will get it. And a lot of you would say, how can you stay so positive when this has happened to you in college, when this has happened to you in corporate America, when this has happened to you as you formed your business, as you continued your business and have you moved on? And you still have a smile on, and you still love everybody. And you know what it's all about? Somebody has to stop and say we can make a difference. So please support the program. Consider getting the book. Go to politicsdoneright.com/books, and you can find all 5 of my books right there. But this is a new one that I just wrote. I'm working on the audio right now. Anybody who subscribe to our newsletter, get to read it online. As part of the deal. Anyway, I got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this, baby. I am what?
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.